Today
game.
I'm here with my buddy Chris Lucian, who's a game developer and a software engineer. He's been building stuff for a long time, and he's releasing a new game that he built in Unity on Steam. And I want to share that experience that he had building the game, going through releasing it, talk a little bit about the game and what the game development process is like, what it's like to build a game when you're working full time in a job, leading a bunch of other people doing somewhat related stuff, and well, what the whole thing is like. What's it like being a game developer, launching out your first indie solo game, or not really your first, but one of your first indie solo games. So we're here to talk to Chris about that today. Welcome, Chris. Really, thanks for coming here and thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's going to be my first game on Steam, and so it's kind of funny. Back when I started making games, I just kind of started on Android. Actually, I was already doing some software development on my own for a while, and then I made some Android and iOS games, but it really wasn't what I wanted to be doing. I really love PC games. I That's just kind of what I grew up playing, PC and other console games and things like that. Mobile just didn't feel like, normal to me, I guess. But it just felt like very accessible, right? So, back in the day, when I just first got started, it was, Android canvas and moving 2D stuff around on Android canvases. And then I just slowly kind of got into it. When Unity came out, I was like, oh, great. When they first started doing mobile games, I was like, okay, I can use an engine now and get more done. And then I think that this latest game is kind of a continuation of that, because I was really happy to not have to write my own engine on some of the basic systems that were built on Android. And then now I'm able to use an engine that has a lot of stuff done for me, like, the game objects and things like that. And then I was really happy to then take that and then now start using, leveraging more of Unity's systems in order to get past some of the things that just took me forever to do in the past. And I'm, now buying artwork instead of using programmer art and stuff. So like, I feel a lot more accomplished with this game than I have in other ones in the past. So it's been pretty cool. But
can we jump back just a little bit and
yeah.
I guess give everybody a real quick intro, because you have released some mobile games, and you released, I know I played the Cow Plop game, right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
it was I think we'll show it real quick up here on the screen, but it's just a hilarious little mobile game. And you built this, like, how long ago did you build Cow Plop?
It's got to be probably 7 to 10 years now, something like that. It's just a long time ago. There's just a lot of these little games here and there I just did on Android and iOS. There's like Eat a Bit and Battle Axe and Cowplop and I just did a lot of like 2D games before I had gotten into Unity. And then a couple of them I ported into Unity and re-released. And so I guess like when I first got started was probably about 10 years ago, just doing them part-time as a hobby. And but then I kind of slowly got more and more serious about it. And I'd say over the last, I guess, 2 years, I've been really kind of honing the craft, I guess, and learning new things and practicing, I guess, beyond that, because and looking more into game design rather than maybe building mechanics or things like that.
Right, so the original games before you got into Unity, you said you were building them all just in Android Studios. It's just like
It was
raw
before
native
Android
Android
Studio
development.
existed. So it was, in Eclipse using Java, rendering everything on an Android canvas. The game loop was something I wrote, right? And then the first time I ever used like a game library, I guess, is when Box 2D was available in Java. I was able to add physics to my game. So Cowplop was actually the first game I added physics to. And it was one of my first games, like probably the second or third was, and what was cool about it was Box 2D had like this time step, and I started learning basically all this stuff about 2D physics that I had no idea really existed. And I realized, when I tried to make it myself, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be impossibly hard to do myself. And so I found Box Duty, kind of an open source physics library for Java, and that was kind of like my first kind of hint that I should be looking into doing more with less in game development. And so you know, after I had built the game, it was actually largely successful compared to the other games that I had made. But it was nice to be able to accomplish, you know, more realistic physics in a game that didn't, you know, before I just hadn't been doing any physics. It was just moving the position and interpolating over time, and so yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, physics and a lot of those things, it can be hard. And I see people do that where they'll try to like recreate it, especially starting out. If you don't know a lot about engines and the systems out there and stuff, it can be easy to go down the wrong path. And I think of it like building games without a game engine, a lot like building web pages without a web server. Like, oh, we're going to make
Yeah.
our own web server because we need it to be very custom, and we're going to do this very special thing that no other web server can do. I feel it's not exactly at that level, but I feel like it's getting pretty close to that now.
It was, I mean, that the stuff that I was working on back then was just incredibly difficult for as little as I would accomplish. I was like, how do I get something on the screen? Okay, well, I got to figure out all this stuff and go to low level. Okay, now I've drawn a single picture. Okay, now how do I make it move? Like, it was just, it was so much work for a bunch of stuff that Unity and other engines just do for you.
Oh yeah, I remember the joy of drawing a triangle in like OpenGL or Glide. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I got a triangle to show up. Step one. All right. Well, it's colored.
I feel
And
like
yeah,
it's like a
now
rite
it's
of
definitely gotten so
passage.
much.
Like, people do it and they didn't need to, but they needed it to learn how much they didn't know in order to know that they needed the next thing.
So I want to talk about the actual game that you built, this Skull's Impossible Quest, or Skull's Impossible Quest, right? Which is a pretty cool name.
Impossible Quest, yeah.
Yeah. You got this little imp going around following a skull and just destroying stuff. Can you give a real quick synopsis of what the game is, like what the gameplay is? And then I want to go
Yeah.
into the technical aspects of how you actually built it and the things that kind of problems that you might have run into and other stuff. But we'll jump into that after. First, just a real quick intro on like what is the game. We'll show it on screen while you talk about it.
Yeah. So Skull's Impossible Quest is a physics-based hack and slash where you command essentially a magical skull that can wield weapons, and while you protect your underling who is making his way to exact revenge on your brother who is largely evil. And in the game, you can essentially pick up different weapons. You move your mouse around or whatever control system you have around to fight off enemies that attack you, and you work your way through this very, I guess, cheeky dark humor storyline that kind of takes you across a journey, fighting multiple bosses with different boss mechanics, and blowing things up and finding collectibles all through the maps and things like that. And I was originally inspired by this from a game that I made a long time ago called Battle Axe. And in Battle Axe, you controlled the system a largely similar way, but I back then I didn't know anything about art and things like that. And so, through the journey of what I had done in the past, I kind of had this idea, and people really liked it. And so as I got feedback from different groups of people, I ended up really liking this idea and running with it.
So can you tell me just how you came to the idea? Like, where did you get this idea? What made you decide to go with this instead of some other game? I assume you had tons of different game ideas. You built lots of stuff. Like, what's the process that you went through to pick this one out of anything?
So it's really funny. In the past, right, whenever I made a game, I just kind of did whatever came to mind. Like, I was like, oh, I just love this idea. I'm going to make it. This is the first time that I made a bunch of prototypes, and then I went to kind of a group, sort of a mastermind group for me that, and I just said, play these prototypes and just tell me which one you like the most. So this is kind of the first game that I built that I didn't maintain total control over the decision. I just relentlessly looked for feedback from friends, colleagues, things like that. And in that feedback, I got just a lot of direction. And so the game that I was going to build, that I was most passionate about, I actually tabled because there was such a humorous and fun reaction from people when I built this prototype. And it ended up being a really good indication that I should go in this direction instead of something else. And so, but the idea that I got for the mechanics was just kind of this idea of like, hey, what if you could just swing the sword around yourself? So, thinking about either, Diablo style or roguelike style, mechanics, but have more, I guess, actual control. And so I got a little bit of inspiration from things like Ragdoll Kung Fu and a couple of other like really like mouse moving physics based games out there. And they ended up kind of fueling this idea of like, hey, let's swing our sword or the axe around and kind of like hack through all the things around us, but do it with a physics system behind it all.
You talked about sharing it with people and getting their feedback, right? And I think it's worth bringing up because the way that you did that, I thought was really impressive, and I think is worth talking about a little bit. How you set up a really easy deployment setup for yourself so that you could share the game with whoever you wanted constantly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people miss out on this and don't understand the process, the thinking, and how much or how little work is involved. So I don't want to spoil it all, but can you just give like a real quick overview of like how you shared your game with people and the secret little magic that's behind it?
Yeah. So in my day job, I do a lot of continuous delivery, continuous deployment type stuff. And so
Can you tell
one of
everybody what that is that might not know what
yeah.
those two words mean?
So continuous delivery is this idea that you get a build out every day, or every time you work on any code, you get a working build out that people can play or can use. Continuous integration is this idea that you make sure everything can build properly. If you have tests, you can run those tests, and basically, so
And it's all
Unity's,
automatic, right?
yeah, all automatic. So you commit your code to a repository, and then some other computer, usually in the cloud, will come pick that up, build it, package it, and then make it available for download. And so one thing, in the previous game that I worked on in Unity, one of my biggest pain points was actually doing like a release build. And so, just in this project, I said, my number one philosophy right now is day one, very first thing, I'm going to set up a continuous integration system for this. And I'm going to have a way to get this out to people as quickly and as often as possible. And then I started working on the game. And so, I tried a bunch of different things. I was hosting things on S3 buckets. And so the very first demos I released, I was just building out to an S3 bucket from a CI platform. But I then realized that I had some time on Unity Cloud Build. And so I was like, I'm just going to try it. And so I had my Git repo hooked up to Unity Cloud Build. It's all kind of set up. I wasn't using Collaborate just yet then, but I realized that there were some benefits to Collaborate that I'm using it now. And so what I ended up doing was I'd get a build and I'd meet with this group of other game developers every week, and I'd get this build out over and over and over again. And so every week people were able to play a new version of the game, give me feedback. I'd take that feedback and work it into the game. And so this game has been kind of a culmination of like many different really great game developer minds together to then influence me, and which has put me in a position to make something a lot better than what I would otherwise have crafted myself. But yeah, so it's really great. The setup right now is I'm using Unity Collaborate because the file sizes and uploading was a lot easier to do. And so in Collab, I just hit publish, and then all of a sudden I get Discord messages saying, hey, your build's ready for Mac OS. Hey, your build's ready for PC. Your build's ready for any other platform that you have. And it's all just automatic. And so then, you know, the next day, actually on my Discord server, I then have it publishes a link to me, and I can just share that link with whoever I want to try the game. And so I just regularly get feedback. I get feedback every time I write code or I do anything to the game, really. I get feedback from people, and that's been incredibly helpful.
It seems really useful. I really like the idea that you had too of doing it right from the start. So like before you have any pain of setting it up, right? Because an empty project, setting it up with Collaborate to build out a blue screen that's a plain scene with a camera should be the easiest thing, right? And then you'll see you won't run into the pain, because I think like trying to automate an already built project can be difficult, especially if you have weird stuff in your pipeline. And it's hard to, it takes time and you'll get demotivated. But you do it right from the start, like, hey, there's really not much to lose, right? Like, it should only take you half an hour, maybe an hour to get used to the system a little bit.
What was really funny, like halfway through the project, maybe like 6 months in or so, I ran into this problem with Cloud Build, and it was I upgraded to Unity 2020, like right in the middle of it. And what happened was the something with Text Mesh Pro broke in Unity Cloud Build. Had I tried to just start using Collaborate and Cloud Build right then, I would have been so frustrated that I would have bailed on it right away. And it was just because there was a kind of an arbitrary error message, and I talked to Unity and they got it all kind of fixed up. But what was interesting was, like, you know, had I been in the middle of an already built project, I think I would have been discouraged right away. But because I had a lot of time invested, but also I knew that the build the day before worked and the build today didn't. And so, and the only thing I did between yesterday and today was upgrade Unity. I'm like, oh, for sure, this is just the Unity upgrade that made it fail. And then I was able to just talk to Unity about it, and like I could find the problem right away, rather than having like 6 months of baggage to try and figure out what the hell went wrong, right? And so it was really nice, because like as you have these incremental things and something goes wrong with your CI/CD platform, you actually know way ahead of time, because most people don't find out these problems until the day they start releasing the game. And so that was really enlightening and useful when it came up.
Yeah, I think I love it as just a philosophy and a plan, and I'm gonna switch to it. I think like for the next project I do, I'm just gonna set up CI before I write any code, before I go away from the prototype stage. Well, all right, continuous integration, time to go.
I think in my opinion, the best thing to do is you get a bunch of prototypes up, you get people to try them, and then the first one that really lands with people, you then immediately just create a new project, set up a CI/CD platform for it, get that first build of the blank project, and then start adding stuff back in, and then building on that. And I think
gonna copy the stuff over or something, or you recreate it?
I mean, copy it over or rewrite it in a better way. So the prototype really is, it's going to be dirty, right? Like so prototypes will end up being really dirty. And the reason for it is just because, you know, you just kind of want to like find where the fun is, right? Like, and just see, because one thing I realized when I was doing this with the prototypes was I tried to make a prototype, you know, every day or every week. And just, you know, so I'd spend about 6 hours per prototype just building as much as I could. So, you know, using just a capsule that then did things in the world, and maybe using Pro Builder to just like build things out real fast, and just, you know, just kind of breakneck, you know, get it out there as quick as possible. But it's like, you're probably not going to want any of that in the end. But you have the idea that you can start working on. And so the code that you'd write in a prototype is going to largely ignore all of the things that you might want to be doing. And then afterwards you say, okay, I'm going to take that. And so like in this project, I made a bunch of prototypes, and then this one I had some stuff that I copied over, but a lot of it is just now obsolete completely. And so you got to like kind of make sure you go back and clean out your project and things like that. So one thing that I learned that through this project that I would do differently next time is start with a blank project, and make that first level releasable, demo quality before moving on. I'm a big fan of vertical slices, and I recently horizontally sliced the audio, and it was a huge pain, to be honest. It was really painful to add audio across the entire game from beginning to end, and that's what's been plaguing me over the last few weeks, and it's really been demotivating. And so vertical slice is going to be, you write your code, you get your scene set up, you get your audio done, you have all of the menus, all the UI, everything just for that first level before moving on to the second level or the third or anything along those lines. Get it production quality before moving on every time. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because you might be like, oh, well, won't it be more efficient to do all of the audio at the same time? But what it ends up being is that you realize that you made these poor design choices across the entire project. And now you have to deal with them in multiple levels, rather than just refactoring for that one level to be better. And then making sure that your scenes are still set up properly after refactoring. It becomes just really painful. And so you kind of want to refactor as you go. You want production quality as you go, and then you quickly realize what you might need to cut out of the game if things that you might have added at the very end might have really messed things up for you. So yeah, I just that's my new philosophy going forward is production. Basically releasable quality for every single piece of the game going forward, because the way that I treated audio in the game was a big mistake this time around, and
Treated it like everybody treats audio in their
yeah,
game.
exactly.
Everybody who's not an audio engineer goes, oh yeah, I forgot to turn on sound, I didn't add any to the game yet. Because
Yes, exactly.
it happens because you play muted all the time when you're developing because you don't want to hear
Yes.
the sounds over and over, and then you forget about it and never crosses your mind again because you're listening to other things while you're playing, right?
Yeah.
Like I've got like the sound of podcasts associated with different games and stuff, like different
Yeah.
music songs associated with the game. I have no idea what it sounds like in there. So yeah, I'm with you there, and I like the vertical slice thing too. Is really important. A lot of people miss that. Well, a lot of people they'll mix it up. They'll either they'll think that a vertical slice is a horizontal slice where they just build out this one system. So they don't
Yeah.
have a game. They just build out like this one really complex, interesting system that could be cool in a full game, but it's just like a system on its own, which isn't compelling enough. Or they just try to build out only a vertical slice and then try to build out vertical slice after vertical slice, restarting it every time, doing it like, hey, we did it this way, I don't like that, we're gonna do it this way, I didn't like that, we're gonna do it this way, I didn't like that, and keep trying over and over. And I think the ideal is more what you're pushing for, and I think what we're getting across is putting together the really good one with the code right, the art right, the pipeline right, and then doing the wider stuff right. Like once you have that,
Yeah.
you can go wide because you've got your code, you've got your plan, you've got your pipeline, and you know what those pitfalls are. After you've done, I wouldn't say necessarily one slice, but maybe two. Do it 2 or 3 times, and then you can start to scale out. Of course, that depends on if you have a team too that's going to be able to scale out. If you're a single person, then you might just be doing slice after slice after slice, or however you
Yeah.
go.
And this, I'll be clear, like this was a purely solo thing, but I bought a lot of stuff off of the asset store and Humble bundles and things like that.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So previously you were kind of big into making your own art, right? And drawing your own stuff, creating your own models, I assume. I
Programming.
always advocate against it, largely because I am a ridiculously bad artist. Like I can copy a picture and make it look like a toddler did it, but beyond that, that's about it.
Yeah.
I always recommend that people either find an artist, if they're not artistically skilled like me, find an artist to work with, or grab stuff off the asset store, or just find lots of free assets until you're at the point where like, okay, this is actually going to be a thing, and then start either hiring people or buying assets. You can buy assets really cheap, and you can hire people on places like Upwork and Fiverr relatively cheap. So let me talk about what led you to the decision to switch away from building a lot of your own art, and how did that pan out?
Yeah. So, maybe I'll give a little bit of history here. So like in my first games, my wife had done a lot of the art. So Cowplot, for example, the reason that looks good is because that she did that art. she got busy with other things and kind of working on her own stuff. And so then I started doing like pixel art myself, and then and you can kind of see that from like Battle Axe and Eat a Bit. And then I started doing kind of like procedural art. I liked writing code for generating planets, and that's what Shoot a Bit was. Um, and then in this game, I was like, well, I really like having the artwork, and I like making the procedural systems, but maybe it's not creating the fun part of the game, right? And so I went from doing things mostly procedural to kind of more handcrafted, or buying the procedural generator system in order to put into my game. And so I decided after writing or making Shoot a Bit that I wanted to make games, not procedural generation systems. And so, and this is like going back to the comments about, you know, whether or not you make a game engine, right? You know, so I came out of that experience just saying, okay, well, how am I going to make a game that is fun and interesting to both me and my audience, and not spend tons of time writing code I don't need to? And so, you know, I got there's a kit that I use called Dungeon Architect, so I bought that. That thing then procedurally generated a lot of the stuff that I think I would do over and over again, and then I customized the end result of that quite heavily afterwards, and it turned out really good. And you know, I would have spent months making something like Dungeon Architect before, and so I just realized that I'm going to make more games if I just, you know, buy more of the artwork and things along those lines. You know, you'll see a lot of like the BitGem stuff or some of the other kind of things out there. And so, you know, basically I bought a lot of the artwork, and I was like, okay, well, now I can actually get through this project and I can do a lot of things. Another thing that I think was really great too, I started making a dialogue system. And then essentially in the group with all the game developers, somebody brought up Inky or Inkle. I forget exactly what the name of that is. And
I think
that
it's
was
both,
just
right? Like a
sorry?
tool and a
Yeah.
language.
Inky, I think, is the editor, and Inkle might be the system or the library. But anyway, they have a free integration into Unity, open source project, and they, you know, that group had made games, but they had all that set up, and so I was able to make this robust dialogue in this game that I originally thought would be primarily a hack and slash with maybe like little to no storyline, and I was able to get this kind of this funny, entertaining storyline kind of dropped into the system, and it worked really well with all the other systems I'd built. And so, you know, so a lot of the game is just leaning on all this work that all these other people have done, but and in the end, like, you know, me by myself using a lot of these systems other people built, I was able to build this kind of full-fledged, you know, beginning to end storyline and mechanics driven game.
Nice. Yeah, and I mean that's the goal, right? Building out
Yeah.
the actual game, not so much the tools. I don't know how many of my friends have done that where they get in. I mean, yeah, one right here, right? They
Yeah,
get in and
exactly.
they start building things, and they start building a lot of systems that already exist, because it's an interesting coding problem. A lot of the time, it's the programmers, right? They find this interesting code challenge. They get distracted from building their game and into solving the code challenge. So
Yeah,
it's
I
something to
mean,
always watch out for. And it's why, like, every time I have one of those, I think like, okay, I should look and see if there's an asset that's going to cost me less than an hour of work to go buy, and then think about how many weeks or days this thing is going to cost me to rebuild right
yeah.
from scratch.
I mean, so like if anybody goes and plays Shoot a Bit, and it's all of the planets are procedurally generated. You'll never run into the same planet twice, right? And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And I spent months building that system. I learned about Perlin noise. I learned about, you know, generating voxel-based planets, and you know, I just spent hours upon hours, and really, like, I didn't make more of the game, and that, you know, the game kind of sunk a lot of my time. And I really love the end product that was, and it was a lot, you know, it was very close to my vision, but it really wasn't meeting that goal of kind of developing games, on a limited time budget, in order to get something out frequently. And so I think I've learned a lot from that, and I think I can move a lot faster now from that experience.
Nice. Yeah, and I think with procedural generation too, a lot of people, not necessarily you, but a lot of people tend to think that it's a way to speed things up and shortcut stuff. But in my experience, it's always the opposite. It always takes longer. You end up getting usually not as good of a result as building it yourself. And
Yeah.
it's very rare that there are people who play enough that they notice that it's been different, that it's different. That you have infinite planets versus 10, or
Yeah.
5 or whatever. Like, there
Had
are
I
very few
had
people
10
that are doing
planets in there, it probably would have been no different.
it. Yeah, no, it's definitely a good lesson, and I think building the game is really important. By the way, I don't know if I've mentioned this already, but if you haven't already wish listed this thing, you should definitely go check it out. Hit the wish list button and save that off before we keep blabbing on more about it, so that you don't forget about
Skull's
it when it does
Impossible
release.
Quest. Yeah.
Yep.
Search for it on Steam.
Go check it out and make sure that you hit that button. But I want to talk about a couple other things. So, like, when you're building out this game, really a couple really important things I want to talk about. One was, like, how did you get this done? Like, you're working full time, running a team, building other enterprise software stuff, and
Yeah.
you're still building this game in your spare time. A lot of people like struggle to build a game like when they're doing nothing else at all, right? All they're doing is building a game. So, what was the process and like the strategy that you had to actually get it to a point where you're going on, you're at wish list level and you're about ready to release on Steam? Like, how did you get that done and not just sit there and keep delaying it, pushing it off, and not getting it
Yeah.
done, or get distracted with work, or just give up because you ran out of time? Like, you must have some idea or some recommendations and tips for people who are struggling to stay motivated on that kind of stuff and just get their shit done, right? Like,
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
would you say to them?
So there's a really great book called Atomic Habits, and I leaned a lot on the concepts from this book. But it's this idea that people will tell themselves, like, one day I want to be a game developer or an indie game developer or hobbyist game developer, whatever. It's like, one day I want to be able to do this, rather than kind of thinking to themselves like, I am a game developer and that's because I develop games every however many times. And so one thing I did with my schedule before starting this project, which I hadn't done with other projects in the past, was I said, okay, I have a dedicated time budget that I'm always going to work on this game. And even if I don't have enough mental capacity to even like work on the game, it's just going to be review the code, look for refactorings, things like that. And so what I basically said was Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, every week, I'm going to spend 2 hours a night basically working on these things. And so I have kids, and so the kids take up that time. So like basically 8 p.m. kind of when they're in bed, that's when I start work on the game. I go until about 10 o'clock, otherwise I'm going to be too tired for the next day. And so essentially for about a year now, I've been doing 6 hours a week total to work on this game, and it got me here. And so with that very strict time budget, I did a number of things. So I rarely, if ever, missed that 2 hour period. Like, I always worked on the game. And that was the Atomic Habit, right? So in there they say, like, you go back and you say, if you write 10 minutes a day on a story, then you're a writer, right? And so it's not that you have completed the novel, it's that you've been writing, right? And so I kind of kept that philosophy all through this thing. Another thing is, whenever I got an idea, I would put it on a Kanban board in Trello. And so this idea of like to do, doing, done, and I use the Trello app to kind of store all of my ideas. And then at the beginning of that, I would look through for the thing that was the most important next thing to do in Trello, and then I would just pull that and say, okay, I'm going to work on getting the level design into the next level done, or writing a system for swinging the sword around, or whatever. And so it was the consistency that got me here, because I think otherwise, like, maybe I would have given up had I been said, I'm going to spend 2 weeks straight to work on this, and in the same amount of time just been burnt out, and then I'm like not come back to it. And so this idea that I will, no matter how I'm feeling, no matter what I'm going to do, I'm just going to work that 2 hours each of those nights, I've just seen significant progress. And so essentially every 6 hours of work, I was able to demo and get feedback. And that had been incredibly valuable because I could very fine-grained steer the project as I went forward. And so when things got too slow, I optimized. When things became boring, I made them more interesting. And I could get that, based off of the circle of feedback that I had, and this like very rigid 6 hour a week schedule. And to this day, I follow that as just doing 6 hours a week of game development and coming back and doing that over and over again.
I think that seems like a really solid plan. I mean, obviously it worked for you, and it seems good. I'm gonna have to check that book out. I think I've read it, but
Yeah.
it seems like a good one to check out too. I was curious though, when you do this, so when you lock yourself into these 2 hours, like, do you ever find yourself like getting too engaged and engulfed and going over and realizing it's 2 a.m., or is that like are you really really strict about it?
Yeah. No. Usually, so because like I have work the next day, or I've already been working that day, like I'm already kind of like getting tired at 10. And I play a lot of like video games on the weekends, so I like still try and decompress still. Um, and so there are times where I'll go to like 11, never usually after midnight. But it's usually 2 hours. It very rarely like kind of went past that, and I think because I'm trying to be real conscious of getting burnt out, and so it's really easy. I think in the previous games that I've worked on, I went to just release the game without like any thought toward marketing, for example, just because I was so tired of working on the game and I just wanted to like decompress. And so my schedule before was like just work on it relentlessly without any kind of like coming back and without, playing a video game, right? And so it's like I got into making games because I like playing games. And I think people might be in the wrong space if they're only making games and not playing games anymore. And so I think that can be a really dangerous thing, because then immediately you're kind of fed up with the idea. And so that's kind of why I went to keep the strict schedule rather than doing the whole like work till midnight. I found that if I had like a really bad bug, that's the only time I'd stay up longer.
Trying
And
to fix it and track it down.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
You're like, I'm so close. And the awful thing is that usually after I go to sleep and wake up the next day, I know exactly what to do, but I can't let go of it, right, and fall asleep. And so those are the times. But otherwise, it's like if I'm just doing level design, so do 2 hours level design, put it down, walk away. And I've been able to keep my mental state a lot better than before. It might not work for everybody, but it's worth trying out.
Yeah, I like it as a strategy and a plan. I mean, I think it works. I see a lot of people get burned out or like work throughout the night and then not do anything for a couple of days, and then
Yeah.
and then forget what they were doing and stuff. So I like that as a strategy. And really quickly, for anybody who hasn't used Trello before, you did mention it, and it's a tool that I use all the time, and I know you use all the time. A lot of us use, but for anybody who doesn't know what it is, it's essentially a card based system, like a Kanban board, or you think of like a board on your wall where you put up cards of your tasks and you can kind of move them around. And can you just really quickly talk about like how you said you have like a to do of the stuff you want to do, the stuff you're doing, and the stuff you're done with? Can you just really quickly like explain what that's like? What is a to do type thing? Like when you're biting off these 2 hour chunks, these 2 hour bites of stuff to do, and really getting into this time
Yeah.
box, like what is that like? What would be some of these things? What does that task look like in that workflow?
Yeah. So depending on what I'm trying to accomplish, it'll be broken up different ways. But basically, try and break it down as small as possible. That's the number one most important thing, is make the tasks very small. If there are larger tasks, then have like a checklist on the card of all the different things. Like if you did do the wrong thing and horizontally sliced like me, then you might have fix the audio on, and then in checklist level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you know, but basically these cards should be kind of like atomic pieces of work that once you push them into your CI/CD platform, you'll get a build out of that, and people can try it out, right? And you get feedback. So that might be, you know, swinging the sword kills enemies, right? Or something. Enemy will run toward the imp in order to attack him, you know, things along those lines. And then you write the appropriate scripts, wire up the animations, you know, that sort of thing. And that might even be a checklist inside that card saying scripts, animations, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And you kind of get this like nice euphoric feeling when you check them off or move it to the done side. Um, and then I have other categories too, other than the to do, doing, done. So like things is like things I need to learn, right? Or things that I need to do after release, or like if I like placeholders for like ideas, you just move them out of the to do because you know you're not going to do them anytime soon, or they get handled on some other schedule. And so that Kanban board should just be like the things that you're going to do immediately and work through them right away. And so you know, it might be stuff like setting up the Steam store and getting your box art together, or you know, again, like setting up an animation controller. All those things can be in there, but you just kind of do a brain dump and say like, these are all the things that I need to do, and you can kind of add those while you're not working on the game, like to this board. Then when you work on the game, you'll know exactly what to do, and you can really efficiently use that time for the actual game development. And so I'll say another thing is like, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to do next while in those 2-hour periods. I am almost like that 2-hour period is almost always fully utilized by game development activities. And then the brainstorming kind of comes like more intuitively, and you know, I'll just be like taking a shower and I'll have a good idea, and then I'll like go out of the shower and type it in on my phone and then go back in the shower. Stuff like that, and that ends up really being useful because then I can have those ideas kind of
Glad to hear I'm
in.
not the only one there with that too.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's like
You
I'll
have to wipe off
randomly
your
get
phone with your
ideas in
towel.
the shower or wherever. It'd be like the middle of the night, and I'll wake up at 2 in the morning, and I'm emailing myself an idea that just popped in, or writing it
Yeah,
down, and my wife's looking at me like I'm a lunatic. What are you
yeah.
doing on your phone too? Like I gotta email myself. Like, why are you emailing yourself? Yeah. So yeah, it's good. Yeah. So you just add to the list as ideas come in and as
Yeah.
thoughts come in and stuff. I think that makes sense. And it really saving the time of not knowing what you're gonna do when you get back to the computer is a huge deal. Like a lot of time it happens, I think, less for solo people that are working on their own projects, but it's definitely like in a work environment. I've seen it so many times where people just come in, don't know what to do. First 2 hours, they do absolutely nothing because they're like,
Yeah.
I don't really know what I'm gonna do yet. I'm trying to figure it out and decide, and like super slow process. And even as a solo dev, it's easy to just get distracted. There's so many different options, and it could just be the next shiny thing that you were just looking at a video about. Now you want to go add that thing, but if you have the board and you have the plan, you know exactly what's next. It makes it a whole lot easier to just stay on task, I think, and get shit done. So
Yeah, there's a lot of theory around it. There's a reason that Kanban is like an industry standard term for both like lean and software development and things like that. There's a lot of procedural science that is out there that proves that this is an effective way of learning, of working. And so if you ever look into lean software development or any of those books, and also just like lean product development in general or lean startup, um, all those concepts are really advocate for managing work this way. And so it's something that I've been applying to both my personal life and my hobbies, as well as my work that I do.
yeah, it works. I mean, the stuff works. When I see places that do it well, it's like night and day difference between
Yeah.
places that don't do any kind of a Kanban board or anything, or have totally different systems, which are usually like not much of a system.
Yeah.
Kanban's the only one that I've seen actually in practice working and being relatively functional, where I saw like progress being made constantly because of the system. Usually, the progress is made kind of in spite of the system.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm a big fan too. So one of the other things I wanted to ask you about was just the like Unity specific weird things or bugs that you came across? Because you've done a little bit of game development outside, and you've done a ton of other enterprise development and stuff outside too. So, was there anything like in Unity or weird about Unity or weird about getting started with Unity that you would recommend people watch out for as new developers starting out or developers coming from more of an enterprise environment where they're used to doing web stuff and other things like you jumped in any like, big lessons you learned there or big problems or pitfalls you can point out?
Yeah. Well, I guess like anybody coming from an enterprise environment, I think the biggest kind of like what the F that people run into is private methods being used externally from an object, right? So like that one's just pretty obvious, right? Mono behaviors are just super weird to anybody who has done any sort of C# development outside. Um, you
And
know,
that's just because those methods are called by something you can't see, right?
yeah,
Every other case, they're
exactly.
called by something you can't see, except for in web development, they're kind of done the same, right? There's
Yeah,
these hidden secret methods that are kind of called by the web server, and you don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I guess you probably can see that code now, but you didn't used
It's
to be able to.
public, like so like
Oh,
that's
they're
the whole
public. Oh,
thing.
that's true.
They're public, yeah. So the fact is that something labeled private, like a private void start or private void update, gets called externally by the engine. So that super freaked me out when I first got started with Unity. And it also makes things hard to like unit test and things like that. But I think just like mono behaviors in general have been like super weird for me. I got used to it, and then I feel like I understand it a lot more. One thing is I had another one was performance issues with things like find object of type and things like that. And so a lot of like caching all of your dependencies and wiring them up in the editor has been a big thing. I think also a big productivity thing is getting used to this idea of C# events and Unity events as two concepts of whether or not you want a design or like a game designer perspective on events happening in the game. So in the game, in Skull's Impossible Quest, there are waypoints that the imp travels to. And what was really interesting to me was I thought, what if I do a Unity event on these waypoints every time you arrive, and then I can start a bunch of stuff going on, right? And so I'm typically used to writing C# events where they're not exposed to the editor. And so one thing that became really easy for me to do, like even just yesterday, I created a tutorial at the very beginning of the game. And all I did was I said, okay, I'm going to add a Unity event so I was just entirely in the designer. I wrote no code for this. And I was able to just say like the imp stops here. This part of the destructible environment becomes destructible again, and this dialogue plays, and then when the dialogue ends, you're able to swing at it and complete it. And so like this is the very first tutorial you run into in the game, and it was just really easy to put together and required no thought really at all. And it was just like I didn't even spend any time in code doing it, and that was really useful to have that. So like Unity events have like their place, right? They're definitely not good to expose to the system unless you're planning for people to move stuff around in there outside of it. And I think like when I'm programming and when I'm doing game design, I'm in two different states of mind. And so I kind of treated it the same way. I just said, okay, well, if I arrive here and I can play an animation. So that was pretty cool. And
Yeah,
so
they're
right,
huge. A lot of
yeah,
people miss those too. I just with events and Unity events, I find that even when I started with Unity, I just kind of avoided Unity events. They seemed like a worse, slower version, but it wasn't really catching that design side benefit because
yeah,
you use them right and you use them in like in your case where there's something that happens and sometimes you want to do something there, sometimes you don't. What that something is could be totally arbitrary. You could go in and write all the code for it and make a custom thing, a custom script for every one of them, or write up some events and hook up a bunch of systems, or you can just make the Unity event and
yeah,
hook up the couple, the things that you actually need. And it's way more versatile for designers. So it's super,
yeah. It
it's
was,
a lot more useful than most people expect. And a lot of people like get stuck with one or the other. Like they don't
mhm,
know how to write C# events, or they think that Unity events are terrible, and in reality, you really want to use both of them.
Yeah.
Right.
You basically have like, you know, the Unity events are going to be exposed to whoever's working in the editor, and the C# events are going to be exposed only to code. And so in some cases in my code, I would have both a Unity event and a C# event fired at the exact same time.
Mhm.
In some places, I'd only do Unity events, and others I would only do C# events, depending on whether or not I thought there would need to be anything. But these waypoints, literally something different happened at every one of these waypoints. And so it was really easy to just, you know, build a little configurator for them, and then for all the repetitive stuff, and then for all the non-repetitive stuff, it was just drag and drop. And so that ended up being really cool. And just other you know, weird bugs and stuff. You know, so object pooling, I learned a lot from you, Jason, on object pooling in Unity. And so I incorporated that heavily. I think that the game would be much less performant now had I not been doing that. And so just learning about object pooling is really important. And then also audio tracks, I think, is something that's fresh in my mind as well. It's just like, when you start a project, it's almost good, I think, in Unity now to do audio first and to set up your sound effects track and your music track immediately. And like the very first, like one of the very first steps I'm going to do from now on every game project I make is I'm going to set up CI/CD, and I'm going to set up my audio tracks. And every audio source I create in the game ever is going to have an audio track assigned to it. And it's actually, it's frustrating to me that Unity by default does not just have everything on an audio track right away.
This is under the audio mixer window, right? Window
Yes,
audio mixer. For
exactly.
a lot of people don't know it exists.
Yeah.
I
So
find that like probably half the people don't know that window is actually there and that they have mixing capabilities built in.
yeah, and so the reason I say this is because I just demoed a little while ago, and everybody's like, I don't want to turn the sound on because it just like blows out my ears, or like I can't do anything with the sound, so like I have the game muted all the time. And so almost, you know, for about a year now, people I've been demoing to have almost always like not listened to the audio. And so so this is like the first time where I was like, oh, well, I have like a mixer in and tracks, but it was so painful to set up because it was literally like, imagine going through every one of your prefabs and being like, do I have an audio source in here? Oh, no. Okay, move on. Okay, do I have an audio source here? Yes, I do. Okay, what track should it be on? It was just like a huge pain. And so it's like, Unity, you know, in my opinion, Unity should remove the ability to have no track on an audio source. And they should have like a little button that says create, you know, the base audio source. Because what's going to happen is you're going to realize like, oh, I need music on another track. And that'll be almost the end of it for like 90% of cases. If you have like audible dialogue, you might have sound effects and dialogue on separate tracks. But going back and remediating your project for that is just a huge pain. So I would recommend to everyone, like, set up your audio source and your audio tracks now.
Like a
Don't wait till
button
later.
on that audio source to just like add a sub mixer or something would be good too, right?
It
Like
would,
instead of it being a drop down, it should just be like a button like create new sub mixer. You hit it and it opens up the audio mixer and gives you all the stuff right
yeah,
there. So it would make it way more discoverable. People would know about it and be
yeah.
at least less likely to run into this situation. And you're not the only
And
one. This happens to
there,
everybody.
yeah, there should be a default with, like, you know, basically every project should come with one, and it should be on
I would make
all
it come with
audio.
like 2 or 3, like make a default, a music, and the sound effects,
Yeah,
right? And then those are there, and then it's just like a drop down and you pick, right?
yeah,
Or maybe it's a selection thing and you just have a button to create a new one, something like
yeah.
that.
So that's
Typically.
one of my biggest complaints right now. But I just experienced it because I just went in and did a whole sound pass, and it was just massively painful. But
You made it
um,
sound better though, right?
yeah,
There's some
the
funny
sound is
jokes in
better. Yeah,
there.
and people actually play it now with the audio turned on. So so that's good. But you know, through this project, I learned a lot about, you know, juice in games, and audio and screen shakes and all the different things that you can do to make things feel weighty and interesting. And so you know, all of these things have been really just useful information to me to, and I learned that from the group that I've been talking to. It's been really good.
Nice. Yeah, I think this has been a lot of useful information for me and hopefully for everybody else watching too. I wanted to wrap it up, but I wanted to again make sure that everybody goes and go wishlist the game, go check it out, go play it. I think you're gonna have a demo out soon, sometime, right?
Yeah. So
Go
February there should be a demo public.
Yeah, go try out the demo when it's out there. Upvote it on Steam and all that stuff. Also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and all that. And you got a YouTube channel too, right, Chris?
Yeah. So we do, Austin and I do a podcast on kind of lean software development, agile software development stuff. And so that's called the Mob Mentality Show. And it's all about mob programming and things along those lines. So if anybody wants to check that out, we got a show and we talk a lot about how to do work well, I guess, in a good way. And I think that applies to any sort of software development or any really development in general. Talk about vertical slices and things like that. So yeah, please visit.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of just mob programming in general, the philosophy and the results that I've seen come out of it. So I think it's definitely worth checking out. If you haven't seen it, go check it out, see the videos, go look at the videos of them working with 84-inch giant monitors. It's cool, interesting stuff, and the results are kind of mind-blowing. It's impressive. That's all I got to say about that.
Thank you.
All right. But yeah, again, just go hit the wish list, grab the game, hit subscribe, and go check out Chris's channel. Again, I want to say thanks, Chris, for talking to me and talking to everybody and sharing your experience, and you're really sharing what it's like to go through the process of building a game while you're working a full-time job, which is, I think, an impressive thing, but it's something that everybody can do with the right planning and the right strategies around it. And I think you've given some really good advice on what that looks like and how to get it done.
All right, Jason, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, man.